Well, hello, welcome to this podcast recording. I'm really pleased to be able to chat to Dr. Andrew Deane. Many of you will know him, Geriatric Consultant at University Hospital North Durham. Andrew is a member of the church family at Grace Church, recently married to Katie, and he's going to be chatting in this little interview about what it means for him to know Jesus, what difference that's made in his life, thank you very much, Andrew, for being willing to do this.
Thank you very much, Mark.
So, Andrew, maybe just to set the scene, tell us firstly how long you've been a Christian and sort of how you first came to really put your trust in Christ.
Well, I'm now 38 and I'm from a Christian family, and my dad thinks I became a Christian at the age of 4, in terms of that's the first time he observed me respond to the gospel message. But in terms of my personal experience, I think I've always thought of myself as a Christian, but then when I went to university and studied the Bible a bit more as an adult, I'd say that at the age of 19, 20 is when I became more solid in my faith. So I moved from my parents' faith or my family's faith to my own personal faith when I was 19.
Wonderful, and presumably while that was happening, that sort of realization of your own faith was while you were studying for what you're now doing, so studying medicine
Yes.
at university. Now, I guess a number of people might find that just interesting or surprising that someone could be, very much a scientist, very based in the natural sciences, and also be a Christian. Has that been something that's been difficult for you? Has there been a tension between your sort of scientific background and your Christian faith?
Yeah, I think it's often an issue that some people struggle with, and I think I did struggle with it quite a lot in my late teens. So when I was doing my A-levels, I think I had that's when I first saw the apparent, the supposed conflict between science on one hand, particularly from biology, and the Christian faith, as laid out in the Bible. And I think it did knock my faith quite a lot when I was 16, 17, when I first was challenged by my biology teacher, who is now a close friend, about evolution and the Bible being quite in contradiction. They say different things about the origin of life. But I think at university, I moved on from a basic level of understanding of A-level biology and chemistry to degree level biology and chemistry, and then you realise that actually the theory is not as watertight as you might expect. And the more you look into it, the more it screams design. And ultimately, the more you look into the history of science, you realize that actually at the foundation of almost every branch of science, there's a Bible-believing Christian or a Bible-believing scientist behind that. Most notably, Francis Bacon in the 1500s developed the scientific method, which we now rely on. And he was a devout Anglican Christian minister. So there are lots of reasons why I'm a Christian, from faith reasons, but also just the science of it marries up really very well.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Another big sort of obstacle, I guess, people might feel, an obstacle to faith, is the reality of suffering and the fact that there are things in the world that are so difficult and people go through such hard experiences. Now, you've actually can testify to what it means to trust Christ in that as well, because a couple of years ago you got a really shocking and troubling diagnosis yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously as a doctor I observe second-hand suffering, and I've had friends who've had pretty horrendous diagnoses, and I've had friends who died in their late 20s and early 20s, and there's I wouldn't want to say that my diagnosis is worse than other people's. It's just there's a preamble in terms of why I don't think my diagnosis is as bad as other people might think it is, but it's a shocking diagnosis and it took me a while to overcome. So at the age of 35, I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease, which interestingly is within the remit of as a geriatrician, something that I know quite well. As part of my training, I ran Parkinson's clinics. I diagnose people with Parkinson's regularly. And did I know I had Parkinson's? Absolutely not. It came out as a shock. It shouldn't have done, because my symptoms were classic. But we doctors are told you can't look after yourself. You have to have somebody be objective, and I'm testament to that. But I remember phoning up the neurology secretary saying, I know my scan for Parkinson's is normal. Can you just ask the consultant to request the next test? And that prompted the neurologist to have to phone me up and said, I'm really sorry, your scan was abnormal, you got Parkinson's disease. And that was on a Wednesday afternoon at about 5:10 in the afternoon. And the Wednesday night and Thursday night, I didn't really sleep because I was just trying to compute, I'm young, I have Parkinson's disease, what on earth does that mean for everything else going on? It's sort of a life-changing moment where you start to reevaluate things. And I have to say that I had a lot of support from a lot of different people, but it doesn't help when you're on your own in your own room, looking in the mirror, thinking, what now? And that's when my Christian faith really shored myself up with that. Actually, I had already thought, because I'd seen suffering, it was almost as though I was preparing for what came to me. The supposed theology of suffering, or try and work out how to respond to suffering. And it makes a massive difference knowing that the Lord Jesus knows what it is to suffer, and so he can sympathize, and he would never leave me. And then you combine that with the knowledge that God has a good purpose for his children, and therefore I can trust that he will use Parkinson's disease, or my experience of that, for his good purpose and for the goodness of me as well. I think one of the interesting things is, one of the things that I'm not very good at is pride. And nothing like a Parkinson's disease to humble somebody. You can't see I have a buttoned shirt, and it took me a minute just to button the shirt up this morning. But yeah, it was quite a shocking diagnosis. But I think my Christian faith is an anchor that I lean upon in good times and bad. And when bad times come, it gets tested.
Thank you. And so we're sort of a couple of years on from that, and you're a doctor, and sort of coming February, March this year obviously has been a crazy time for all of us, but particularly those working in frontline medicine, as the coronavirus outbreak has come and all these changes have happened. You've got an underlying health condition, and then on top of all that, you actually did contract the coronavirus a few weeks ago. Firstly, just tell us, what was it like, and how are you feeling now?
Yeah, because of my Parkinson's disease, the hospital was trying to look after me by sort of moving my job to somewhere else, and inadvertently I ended up. COVID is a very virulent disease and very infectious, and so I contracted it from work. And I remember the first symptom I had on the Monday evening, just feeling quite tired, a bit headachy, so I went to bed early, and on the Monday night I just had really high temperatures and fevers, rigors, sweating, and I thought, this is probably coming down with coronavirus. I told Katie, my wife, I think I'm coming down with it. My temperature's really high. I got the thermometer out, and it read 37.6. I was not quite high enough. But then I was saying, well, yeah, but I was shivering and rigoring, and sure enough, later on it was 38.1. So on the Tuesday, we went and got my swab done, which came back positive on the Thursday. And unfortunately, Katie got it as well, so she had her swab on the Thursday. So we both had it. I was slightly ahead of her, but physically it wasn't as bad as other people have had. But mentally, when I was there Monday and Tuesday, when you read the headlines of people at high risk groups, men are more likely to do badly. People with underlying medical diseases are supposed to do badly as well. I said, well, I've got Parkinson's. I've had that for 2.5 years. That probably qualifies. I like to keep myself quite fit, but you can't help but think, maybe this is the way I'm going to go. Am if I start getting breathless, I need to go to hospital. Ooh. So it's more of a psychological impact, I think. The physical aspect, it wasn't as bad as other people have had it. I mean, one of my colleagues ended up in intensive care for a week, and she was very, very poorly. And I know a local GP actually died from COVID as well. So there's so many healthcare workers have died from it, but it makes you reflect on what grants life purpose and how do we cope with difficult times.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Just sort of pushing into that a little bit then, and sort of the lessons you've been learning and just your reflections as a Christian on the things that have happened. I suppose, yeah, firstly, and you've talked about some of this already, but how has knowing Christ helped you through the various health challenges? So the getting coronavirus recently and those concerns, but then the bigger health challenges of your Parkinson's diagnosis. How has knowing Christ helped you as you faced those?
I think knowing Christ means that, well, also being known by Christ means that I'm secure in my position as a child of God, which is unique amongst any religion, is that guarantee that if you put your trust in Jesus, you're secure. Your place in heaven is assured, because it's not what we do, but what he has done. And that means that no matter what happens, that can be relied upon. And God has been so faithful over my entire life. I look back and he has protected me from certain things. He's allowed me to experience certain things to prepare me for what I'm going through now and what I'm going to go through in the future. And knowledge of security and love, you can't find that anywhere else. And so it is the only hope that I know that guarantees life in a future of perfection and life with a purpose here. And of course, I've put the distinction, perfect life in the future and life with a purpose now, because sometimes life now will be suffering and difficult. But knowing that there is a God who loves me means that there is purpose and even dignity in suffering. It's not mindless suffering. There's always a reason behind it, even though I may not know what that suffering reason is now. For all I know, my testimony about my experiences having Parkinson's disease and coronavirus and all the things that might help people with their own suffering, so the good comes out of it. But also personally, I feel as though I've been changed in a positive way by it as well. Nothing better than a bit of humility for somebody who's quite proud like I am. So it's personally very helpful, but also I think publicly, I think people would be able to associate with that and learn from that and be thankful for that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, some people, perhaps some listening, will sort of very much respect your sort of personal opinion and be glad that having Christian faith has proved a help to you in hard times, but they may well be really struggling to get over the whole idea that there is all this suffering in the world, and they may have suffered themselves personally, and they may just be finding it very difficult to reconcile that idea with the existence of both a powerful God and a loving God. So a God who can do something about suffering and is loving and wants to do something about suffering. Yeah, would you have anything that you would say to people who are sort of wrestling with those sort of questions?
Yeah, I think it's a really big issue for many people, and it's an understandable tension. I think we all feel it, and I think the reason why we feel that tension is because, well, the Bible would say we're created in the image of God, so we have a few things that we value. We want justice, we want love, we want purpose. But the things about those very nature of those things is, if we want justice, well, the justice is going to come down on me because I'm a sinful person and I don't follow the rules that God has instituted. And I think that's the reason why there is suffering in the world, is to point out that there's something wrong with the world, and the reason is we're not as we're supposed to be. And God is angry at our sin, but that's not where he finishes. He finishes on the cross saying, yes, I'm angry, but I can deal with the anger and deal with your sin on the cross. And And clearly that means that people need to look at across to answer the question of suffering, and that's where I would go to. But also just thinking there is reason for generalized suffering, but there's also reason for personalized suffering as well, because I don't think there's suffering without purpose. It's a question of what that purpose is and trusting that God knows what he's doing, and I do.
Thank you. Just lastly then, and thanks so much for all your reflections. As we sort of sit here living under the coronavirus with no one really having much idea of sort of where this ends, the lockdown is sort of gradually easing apparently, but it's very hard to see an endpoint to that, and the idea of life returning to normal seems pretty fanciful at the moment. What do you think are perhaps some of the lessons that we might be learning or could be learning from this time of coronavirus outbreak?
I think as a doctor, it's one of the most humbling experiences we've had as a medical profession for a long, long time. Clearly, other countries may have got their response a bit better than ours, but I think, irrespective of that, when you get a disease that there's no cure for, it presents in unusual ways, everybody has symptoms that is different, it's incredibly humbling. Whereas I think medicine practice a few months ago versus medicine practice now is a greater humility, because ultimately we're at the mercy of this virus that we don't really fully understand. And so from the professional side, that's something I've observed. From a personal side, just acknowledging that we are mortal and we are weak and we can get knocked massively by relatively small things, because life is fragile, but also life is precious. The amount of hurt and pain by seeing loved ones die or suffer greatly, there's a reason why we're upset by it, because life is precious. And when you combine it all together, you think there's purpose, life is precious, but I am weak. I need to rely on somebody who's strong. And that's why I think the more I reflect upon it, it is definitely faith affirming coronavirus experience.
Andrew, thank you so much for sharing. I hope that's been useful if you've been listening online. And if you would like to pursue these things a little bit further, we're currently running all of our Grace Church services on Zoom. So you'd be more than welcome to join. Head to our website if you'd like to find out details of how to do that. We'd love to see you one Sunday. It's not quite like normal church, but I think it is a nice and good experience. And we're thinking each week about the issues that Andrew's raised. So why not come along and continue to weigh these things up for yourself. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today. And thank you for watching as well.
Thanks, Mark.